good, man. That's perfect then. We'll just pick it up where we left off. Where are you living at?
So I'm based in Utah, northern Utah, born and raised. I've kind of traveled all over for work and things, but I live in Utah. My family's from southern Idaho. Like my siblings were all born in southern Idaho, Rupert and Burley, Idaho, a couple small towns. My parents moved down to Utah, and then I was born in Utah. So I'm the youngest of four, and they were all born there, and then I was born here.
Good on you, man. That's really cool. Yeah, we were
Yeah.
just talking about Alone before I pressed record. You look like a guy that could go on Alone, just with the beard and the slicked hair and the little collared shirt. Like it looks like you're like the perfect participant. I don't know what it is, but
That's
um,
funny. Yeah, normally I just rock the stash. Right now, I've been growing out the beard a little bit just because I go back and forth. I've got a lot of facial hair and it grows quick. Plus, I've got, it's hunting season. I've got a bunch of different hunts coming up and I sort of let it just grow out, get into my mountain man stage, get in the mode.
I get it. Yeah, the mustache community, it's like its own little thing. Like if you got a good mustache, we apparently stick together and we have to acknowledge every single person that also has a
Yeah.
mustache. It's a very, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm still getting used to it and I'm trying to fit in accordingly,
I
but
get
yeah, it's funny.
comments, when I shave it or I'm walking through the airport or things. You see guys that have one, I don't know, traditionally throughout history, right? It's a sign of virility. So you see guys, even to this day and age, whether they realize it or not, when I shave a mustache, I'm walking through the airport. I'll see a guy that has one and he'll look at me as I walk by and he's checking mine out, comparing his own, right?
It's like a
Yeah, it's
just a dick measuring contest. It's
yeah,
funny.
that's exactly right. I'm just like, yeah,
Yeah.
right on, man.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Carry on.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Listen, do you do a lot of writing? You sent me that little piece via email, and it was really good.
Yeah, not really. Recently I've done a few things just as needed. Well, so I'll maybe take that back. I do a lot of writing for work, technically. I don't do a lot of like writing for
Freelance
fun.
like for your stuff.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I've always been interested in it. I think I'm a decent writer just because I have to be to some aspect, like I said, professionally. Nothing to do with the outdoors or hunting or anything, but no, yeah, we've got total side note, but I had a buddy come with me on a bear hunt this year and we recorded a bunch of footage. We're trying to put together a really high quality, kind of short film. It won't be very long, maybe 10, 15 minutes, but just really high quality. And I tried to write some narrative for that I would record over the top. And so I've done a few things like that recently. But I appreciate you saying that. I definitely don't do a lot of it.
How old are you?
I'm 38. 38, married with three kids. I've got a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and they all just kind of started back in school. So the past two
Good
days has,
on you.
yeah.
Good, good on you. When I was reading that little snippet you sent me, it comes off as like you have an old soul. Do you ever get that? Like you just have this old like Western soul about you, especially that comes through in your writing. Obviously, I've never talked to you before. We've been talking for less than 5 minutes, but just by reading your writing, it just have you ever been told that before or no?
Yeah, sometimes. Well, what's interesting is even for work, the role that when I first kind of started my career, and maybe just to highlight that so people know what I'm talking about. I've always been in sales of some kind, but I work with public safety agencies. So most of my career has been spent when you call 911, the software they use to receive that phone call and dispatch it out. And I think you said you're former law enforcement, right?
Yes, sir.
Is that right? Yep. So the dispatching
Mhm.
software they use, right? CAD, computer aided dispatch. I've sold that forever. And then the mobile software that you've got out in your vehicles when you obviously, got to write an incident, do an incident report, or the records management system after that, and then jail management, kind of this full suite that law enforcement and public safety uses. I've always done that, but I got into it sort of at an early age. I got the job, had a lot of sales experience, kind of sold myself to this company. And everyone in that role was probably 10, 15 years older than I was. So just to your point about kind of an old soul, I think I had enough, for one, just sort of maturity and experience, but also just kind of fit in a little bit with the older crowd. I know that's separate from sort of the Western side of things, but I've heard it in various aspects. Yeah.
That's neat, man. Again, we're just figuring each other out here, but it seems like you kind of have a story to tell, man. I don't know what it is about you, if it's your page, if it's the cowboy-esque or what it is, but I have a couple ways that I want to go with this, but What was your upbringing like? Was it tough? Did you guys struggle? Did you come for money? Like, what was that like, and how did you essentially kind of become the man that you are today?
Yeah. Yeah, interesting questions. So I wouldn't say, yeah, as far as like financially growing up is interesting. My dad was in real estate, and when I was probably elementary, going into junior high school, he did really well for a while, just like any sales role, right? It's high risk, high reward. He did really well at that period of time. So I'm the youngest, my siblings were in high school, kind of benefited from that, in that stage of life for them. But after that, there's just a few different things that happened, whether it was the economy or just personally, where his career kind of took a turn a little bit. It didn't do so great after that. So when it comes to my upbringing and just the financial side of things, I wouldn't say, we were poor. I certainly had a good life, but then going into high school, I didn't really have the same benefits per se my siblings did. They all kind of got some assistance with getting their first car or whatever. I, bought a GMC Sierra that was shit brown colored for $1,500, in the glove box. I think the official color of the truck was Yuba Gold. So me and my buddies, like everybody called my truck Yuba Gold as a nickname because that was like the official color, but it just looked like diarrhea, to be honest. And so I had this truck I bought. And then, when I was talking about my professional career in sales, I just kind of has always had a sales background. But because of that, I had a bunch of different jobs in college, but I paid for all of my college 100% myself, right? I had to kind of work my way through college, pay for that, get a degree, and then eventually onto a corporate career. But um, which I think was all good. I don't resent any of that at all. Definitely has made me the person, the man I am today. But I think I had to work for a certain amount of things that, I've achieved or stages I've gotten to in life. I feel proud about the things I've accomplished just because I know the amount of work that's had to go into it. So I don't know. It's tough. I think people complain about their parents, their upbringings a lot. And I think we had challenges, but I have no complaints. I mean, I think we had challenges of our own, but I think I had a great childhood and definitely all the things that I either went through or accomplished today kind of come from that. So that's sort of the, financial side of things. When it comes to just what was the rest of life like, and maybe to try to answer some of your question there. So I grew up in Utah. Like I said, I grew up in just sort of a suburban town just north of Salt Lake City. So, I skateboarded, I snowboarded as people do in Utah, skied. I started skiing. My parents, took me up, pushed me down the hill and said, "Here you go." And then eventually after a couple of years of skiing, transitioned to snowboarding. And me and my buddies all had passes. Back in the day, they just give you these crazy cheap snowboarding passes. If you were in junior high or high school for $99, you'd get like a season pass. And so we either have our parents take us up just all the time. They drop us off, and this was even in junior high. It's kind of crazy to think now the stuff we used to do, but they drop us off and we just go ski and snowboard all day by ourselves, even just as little junior high kids. And now things are just so crazy expensive. But I did a lot of that, and I say that because there was that side of my life. But then at the same time, like I said, coming from Southern Idaho, um, we'd go up there for family reunions and unions and things. And it was only, a couple hour drive up there. And so I was up there all the time, and we had family members that lived on farms and had some land. And I was around livestock and animals and always just loved that. And a little bit of a movie buff kind of my whole life. So I just watched all the different Westerns growing up and loved it, and kind of wanted to be like that, right? But I didn't grow up around or having horses per se. So that was always just kind of in the back of my mind as something that like I always loved and wanted to do, and kind of wanted to be one of these cowboy guys. And so I sent you that a little bit of that write up, and it's interesting. I'd written in there a few things and called out some stuff. So I have these pictures even today. I went to like my first day of kindergarten with these, first of all, like homemade pajamas that my mom made. They're like Ninja Turtle pajamas that she sewed, and they're like tucked into
So
some
baller,
cowboy
dude.
boots. Yeah, and they're tucked into cowboy boots that I always wore all the time because I wouldn't let her put something, more respectable on me before this first day of kindergarten. So I have this picture in front of the front door with like Ninja Turtle pajama pants tucked into my cowboy boots. So even though I grew up in like a suburban area, it was just kind of like ingrained in me. And I had been around it, knew I wanted to have them maybe one day, but never really expected it. You know, if you don't come from a family that has that, you know, it's difficult, right? It's difficult to learn what you need to know to have the infrastructure to house horses and take care of them. And so it definitely takes a certain amount of like persistence to figure things out and then a certain level of income to be able to do it. So it wasn't until later in life I got into a position to be able to, you know, buy some and own them myself. But that was just kind of one part of it I had in the back of my mind. Uh, so there's that kind of the like the little bit of Western aspect that was always in the back of my mind, even though I didn't kind of grow up that way. And at the same time, then there was like the hunting part of it. And I wrote a little bit about this. And it's funny, this has come up more recently, and whether it's an interview like this or that little piece I wrote was kind of for a magazine article there. Got a little feature coming up that I'll be in. And there's a ton of interest in it. And I just haven't talked a ton about it because to be honest, my family didn't talk a ton about it, and I didn't know much about it until I got older. But I was always super drawn to the outdoors. And so on my mom's side, like we'd go camping with her dad and her mom, so my grandparents on my mom's side, and we'd go camp and hang out. And you know, at the time, I think my grandpa was in his 70s already, so you know, he was getting up there, especially previous generations. You know, they age pretty quick. He didn't last quite as long. So I mean, he was an old guy, but he'd take me up on the mountain and we'd hike around, you know, and I'd carry his 30-06 for him up the hill, right? And I felt like $1 million just hiking around with my grandpa with this 30-06 looking for deer. And it was awesome. I always loved it, but my dad didn't do that, right? And I didn't know why at the time. He just wasn't really a hunter. We'd go camp and stuff quite a bit. They liked the outdoors, but he didn't hunt. So, you know, I'd do that and I thought it was cool, and I'd eventually want to go hunting as I got older. But as I got older, you know, and you get to a point where you can take hunter safety and you can get your first rifle and things like that. Again, my dad never did it. So you can imagine as a little kid drawn to hunting and fishing and shooting and all these things, to try to do that on your own, if you don't have a parent doing it, is extremely difficult. And my brother didn't really do it. You know, I've got a brother and two sisters. So it was kind of just me, just this weird internal drive, just always loved it. But they were supportive. So like I got my first shotgun, I think when I was 12. You know, my mom and dad had to buy it, but it was mine. And you could have one at that age, right? I got hunter safety, and I'd go out with buddies and we just like go bunny blasting, shoot rabbits and stuff. And then, you know, eventually kind of started to do waterfowl because I had some friends that would go with their parents or they knew how to. And we had some places close by. So we'd go do that. And then as I got, you know, a little bit older and then could either drive somewhere with buddies or get rides somewhere and then hike around to try to go chase deer or elk, then I started to kind of do that. But what's interesting is growing up, I always had this, I would say a little bit of a resentment. Like, you know, here's the thing I love to do. And you always see all these kids and my buddies with their dads. And my dad didn't do that. And I never knew why, right? It was kind of like, oh, how come you don't take me out, right? How come I have to try so hard to do all this stuff on my own? And I never knew it because he didn't talk about it. But come to find out later in life, he had this his brother. So he's 10 years younger than his closest sibling, right? So he had a brother that was 19, you know, and he's 10 years younger than him. So just like a little kid. It's not like he kind of knew everything that was going on. But later in life, he would then tell me, yeah, I had this, you know, this brother, your would-be uncle, that went hunting after, you know, after school one day or whatever it was. Yeah, it must have been after school. And I have a bunch of news articles and things now, but he went hunting after school one day in southern Idaho, him and his buddies, and went up over the weekend, and this huge snowstorm rolled in. And eventually, long story short, you know, we can get into the details, but long story short, he went missing. And then they never recovered the body, never found him. No idea what happened to the guy. 60 years later, they still have no idea. So it's this big mystery. And so coming back to my dad, right, I didn't realize that until later in life when he kind of opened up and started to tell me about it, because he's not going to explain that, you know, to a little kid. So I had all these, you know, feelings of a little bit of a resentment, like I said, growing up wanting to do those things. And then I'm, you know, realized later, oh, okay, that's why my dad never wanted to go hunting, right? He had this older brother that went missing. And, you know, my dad would tell me these stories now, how when he was a kid, since he was so much younger, they'd go out into the woods and their camping, quote unquote camping, was they just walk around for miles and miles, right? His parents and him, they walk around in the woods And he thought that's what camping meant. You go camping, you walk around in the woods, and he didn't know why. He was just like, this sucks. What are we doing? Right? I hate camping. Come to find out later, right? He realized, oh, we were walking around looking for my brother. So they never found him, but it's just interesting. He came from that and didn't hunt. And then he has a son, his youngest, that's obsessed with the outdoors and constantly going out, driven to do it. So, it's interesting to think about how he probably felt about that. But yeah, so that's, I have these two kind of parts. A lot of what I do on Instagram now, right, which is where we connected is horses and then the outdoors and hunting. And that's kind of how, both those came into my life, right, or the background on them rather.
Yeah, I want to get into what we think happened to your dad's brother here in a little bit because I did have that written down. Well, what do you think drew you to hunting in the outdoors? Do you feel like it was the difficulty or just the solace, or what was it that drew you and then keeps you coming back to it? Because it's
Mhm.
not for everybody, man. Like people might tune into this and be like, wow, it seems like they're talking about hunting a lot. We'll change the channel. It's not for everybody, but for those who it is for, we love it, man. Like absolutely love it. And it's hard to explain. So can you put it into words what brings you to it?
Yeah, I think like anything, we probably have like your tastes and your interests evolve over time, right? So I probably had different reasons when I was younger than I do now. But I think one consistent thing throughout all of that is I've always had this sense of adventure, right? I think, well, it's funny. I see Instagram pages that I follow where they're trying to relive like old tall ships, right? Sailboats with huge masts and everything. And I see that and I'm like, man, if I lived back in the day, I would have been a pirate, right? Like I would have been on these ships sailing around the world, or I would have done, whatever kind of, I would have been an Arctic explorer. So it's the adventure aspect of it for me that my entire life has kind of drawn me into it. So whether that's just going on a super long hike and camping with your buddies or hunting. So like when I was younger and maybe didn't do quite as much hunting, I had all sorts of crazy adventures with buddies doing that. And so now as I get older, that's still a key theme for me. I do horses most of the time, kind of for that reason too. It's a different adventure. There's advantages to having horses, but there's also a ton of challenges, right? It's a lot of work packing horses into places. I can only camp where I know there's enough feed or water, but I also do it because it makes the entire experience, the adventure, more of an adventure. So hunting in and of itself is a pursuit that I love, and it adds an aspect or another element to the adventure. But I think as a whole, it's more the adventure that draws me into it. And then, hunting or fishing is just one other element you bolt on top of it.
How many horses do you bring?
I only own three. It's kind of all about like fit in the space that I have that I own here right at my house. And so sometimes I'll bring all three, sometimes I'll bring two, or if I go with a buddy that has multiple, right, we'll pack in multiple. But sometimes I'll ride in by myself and take all three.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I've never done like a horseback hunt like that. It's kind of on my list though. I've ridden horses or rode horses, however you correctly say it, but I've never actually done it for a hunt. And it just sounds rad, man. It'd be cool, especially getting like super deep back in there and being able to access pieces that you probably wouldn't normally be able to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. Man, yeah, it's fun. They open up opportunities. Like I said, it also poses challenges too that you just wouldn't realize unless you've done it. If I'm going to take horses, I have to make all sorts of considerations on where I'm going to go because they have to have food and water, right? And how am I going to hunt this area specifically because I have the horses? So there's advantages to just solo backpacking. Not even solo. I just say solo because the majority of my hunting is done solo. Just kind of how it happens. But for years, that's all I did, right? Just backpacks. I had all sorts of ultralight gear, and I still do, which is nice because it makes it easier on the horses. But I can also get away with just packing way more stuff. That's kind of the nice part of it. But I mean, to just go hike into an area 5 miles, 10 miles, whatever, there's a lot more flexibility. You can just post up anywhere. I think you were talking to Cade on your last podcast about that exact thing, right? You could post up on a rock and just sleep there uncomfortably, wake up in the morning and be ready to go in your spot. Where with horses, I got to go back to camp, make sure that they get food and water that night, put them away, tie them up on the high line. in the morning, because you want to be out early, I usually just leave them tied up and I'll go out and hunt, and then I'll come back, late morning or afternoon, and I tie them up with hobbles around their legs just so they can kind of hop around and graze and don't run off. But I'll come back and do that and then hang out, make sure they get plenty of food and water, and then, tie them up before I head back out sort of for the afternoon, evening hunt. So that just changes your plans. But yeah, I love it. They also, provide companionship. I love having them for that reason. So I used to, for years, like I'd just go solo backpacking. And it's funny because there's so many things I was thinking about on your last two podcasts with Kate and Cameron Haynes. And I have a lot of thoughts on just all of that: backpack hunting, horseback hunting, the hunting industry in general now. But what's funny is I used to do that solo and backpack for so long. And you were talking about the alone aspect of it and being afraid of the dark. Like it's so true. Even to
It's
this
real,
day.
dude.
Oh, when you go, I
Mhm.
hunt the wilderness Utah areas of Utah, and you go pack in by yourself really deep, you don't understand how quiet, and dark it gets. Granted, there's like stars out and you can see things, but when you're out there and you're in your tent by yourself and there's nothing else around, and you can hear every single sound that gets made, and you hear, even if it's a squirrel dropping uh, acorn on some log, it sounds like Bigfoot next to your tent. And you're like, oh shit. So yeah, it's real. So having horses uh, helps with that a ton. They're a ton of fun because they, have this companionship. They also, you know, black bears generally aren't going to come around. Grizzlies, who knows? But black bears generally aren't going to wander in your camp when you have horses around. They just don't. They see another big animal and they're just kind of like, yeah, whatever. So there's some protection with that too. So that's made it also, I think, more fun and a little bit easier on certain things like that. You don't feel quite as alone. So yeah, I've done some crazy hunts, either backpack solo or with my horses in the past few years too. So it's been fun.
I like how you said it, like they bring you companionship. When I go out alone, like I'm truly alone,
Yeah.
the companionship for me is like the camera that I'll bring. Like I'll bring
Yeah.
my camera and hook it up to my bag. And like obviously it's not a living thing, right? But it's something that I can do because my phone doesn't work, but it's something that I can do and like obviously take pictures and film random things. And then I can go back and look at that and like it stirs up internal conversations in my mind that I'm having with myself just based off of like the art that I'm trying to create. So if I didn't bring that, man, it'd be really, really, really brutal for me because that's what
You got to
takes a
bring a
lot of
good
guys out
book,
of
man.
hunting.
You sit down and read a
Oh,
book
I do
all day.
that too. Yeah, I do that. I do that too. Um, but that's what I've noticed will take a lot of guys out of hunts is just
Hell yeah.
simply being by themselves, especially during
100%.
the day, man. You get that good half
Even
hour in the
me,
morning, and
as
then it's
like a
then
diehard hunter, that happens. I'll go up, and not so much now, but
yeah,
like after years of hunting, I'll be up there and you're like, man, I haven't seen anything. This sucks. It's hot. There's no animals in this area. And you convince yourself, you're right. Hey,
yep,
maybe if I just get out of here and I'll go home, I've got stuff I got to do. I have three kids and a wife. You know what? I'll just leave and I'm going to check out this new spot tomorrow or next week. And that'll be more worth my time.
yep.
Totally the worst decision you could make, right? But you justify it to yourself because you're lonely and whatever else. And you just start thinking about things and you get in your own head. But yeah, you got to have distractions for sure.
Yeah, without question. Without question. I've gone through it, especially like when I first started out here doing that. Like, fuck, this is brutal. Like yeah, I'm used to going hunting for like a couple hours and being home for breakfast. I grew up in the Midwest, so it's a totally different ball game. You come out here, it's like it's an excursion, man. Like you can't
Yeah.
hunt elk for a day, at least not where I live in Eastern Montana. Like I'm not just
Mm.
gonna bomb out for the day and come back. We're
Yeah.
making this whole thing a trip. And if you're by yourself, you better have shit to do and you better be in the right mindset to stay
Yep.
out there because those days get long and they get hot, man.
You want to talk about mindset? I just said this to my wife last night. It's so funny. Here's one of my favorite things to do to get in the mindset. Here's my pro tip for you. So everybody has their phone. You got Onyx, whatever. You're going to be offline, but certainly you can download movies and stuff. I usually am not watching that unless I'm like in my tent for 30 minutes watching a movie before I pass out from exhaustion, right? But usually at least like the night before or something, or when I'm there in the tent, I'll have something downloaded on my phone. And the movie that's always there, it's just kind of there in case I need to pull it up, is Jeremiah Johnson.
Good on
So
you.
I pull up Jeremiah Johnson. You watch that for a minute, right? The ultimate mountain man movie, and he's out there by himself in the wilderness, and I gets you in the mode. So like I watched Jeremiah Johnson the night before I'm sitting in my tent, I'm like, yeah, Let's do this. It's funny. So there's my pro tip for you. Download Jeremiah Johnson, watch it as you're out there, or the night before, so you can get in the mode.
Yeah, I love that, dude. I got a pro tip too if we're just dishing them out like that. Free game for everybody this week's podcast episode.
Yeah.
I made a post about this maybe a month ago. But if you go out for a trip and if you aren't having your shit squared away at home, you will leave 1000% on that
Mm.
second,
Mm.
third day.
Oh yeah.
If you're not setting your old lady up for success, especially if you
Yeah.
got kids and stuff and you're leaving her with a freaking to-do list of all the man shit that should be done around the house, you're fucking yourself big time.
Yeah,
Big,
that's a great
big, big time. Because that guilt will set in. I
one.
promise, especially during the day when those elk are bedded and you got fuck all to do and it's 95 degrees. You're like, dude, I feel like such a prick. I'm not doing anything. And she's at home grinding because
That's
I was
exactly
lazy.
right. Yeah, you're
You
like,
will
what am I
leave.
doing here, right? Like I'm just sitting here under this
Yep.
tree, laying in the dirt, being lazy. There's no animals up here. I would have seen them by now. Man, I've been bugling. I should have heard them by now. And again, there you go. All of a sudden, you start down the spiral. Mostly just because you're thinking about all the shit you should be doing at home, right? But if you've
Hmm.
squared that away, that's going to be a little bit easier for you for sure. You're like, no, I've got the time here. Everything else is taken care of. There's nowhere else I need to be at this exact moment. I can stick it out a little bit longer. So that's a great point.
What's the longest trip you've been on by yourself?
Uh, by myself, just
Yeah.
alone, like a 3, 4, 5 day hunt. I mean, I've done stuff like that pretty regularly. I, to be honest, I haven't had to do anything longer than that, really. And generally, I'm like anybody else because I've got a day job. Whether you've got the PTO you can take off and go hunt during the week, or just hunting on weekends, stuff like that. I mean, a typical kind of schedule, right? So for one, I haven't had to, and I've never really gone out and scheduled like I'm going to go hunt for these 2 weeks, right? I'm going to be out for 2 weeks or something. So, but I've certainly done like a 5 day hunt solo before.
Cool.
Which, you get
Yeah.
to day 4 or 5, yeah, and you haven't had success yet, and you're by yourself and you're lonely and you're not seeing anybody. Yeah, it gets rough.
Yeah. Start hearing shit.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Um, we're kind of bouncing all over the place, which is kind of how I roll. If you haven't noticed that by now, I know you've listened to a few episodes, but do you mind if we
No
talk
worries.
about your uncle?
Yeah, whatever you want to talk about, no worries.
What do you think happened?
So
Like
here's
you
like
personally.
I'll tell you exactly what I think happened. Because I don't think it's fun to think about like conspiracies and stuff, but I think it's probably super simple. So I'll give you the details I can recall because I haven't looked at the articles and things in a while, right? So it's not all fresh in my mind. But what happened was he went out, they set up camp sort of high up on this knob, pretty well-known area. I mean, there's people around. That's the thing. There's different hunting camps and people they drive past, but they had their camp here. I think there was 4 or 5 of them, you know, just out of high school age type dudes, 18, 19 years old. I think he was, like I said, 19 at the time. So they're at this spot and it was morning. Yeah, it wasn't evening. It was a morning hunt. So they forecasts was that there was going to be crappy weather. There was some snow coming. I don't think anybody anticipated how large the snowstorm was going to be because the news articles even referenced that it was sort of a record year for snow. And there's this huge snowstorm that rolled in. In fact, there's other hunters from that exact same weekend missing all throughout the state. Like he's not even the only one. That's what's kind of crazy. But anyways,
What?
he went out in the morning and went down from this knob kind of into this little canyon. And uh, I'll recount kind of what happened, but this is all info that came out after the fact, right? This is how we know it. So it sounds like I'm recounting in real time, but we just know this from what people have said afterwards, right? So he came off this knob, dropped into this little draw, this canyon. He apparently shot a deer. He drug it to another spot because they found where he actually shot the deer and they could see where he drug it. He left it there because everything just started to get kind of socked in, right? And there's tons of snow. He couldn't drag it back up out. I think he got turned around and rather than going back up the draw, and maybe it was difficult. I don't know. He went down and he walked like a mile or two away until he hit a big major road, like a dirt road, right? But one of the big roads in the area. And so he's walking up the road, which would have eventually gotten him back to kind of where he wanted to go. And this older guy, Sounds like maybe he was in his 50s, 60s, something like that, by himself in a truck, comes driving by and he sees this kid. And here's the other thing. This is back in the day, right? He's not wearing Kuiu super nice gear. He's wearing blue jeans and a red hoodie. This is the last thing he wore. So he's soaking wet, wearing blue jeans and a red hoodie. And this guy drives by and he sees this kid with his 30-06 rifle, picks him up. He's like, "Hey, you got to get in, man. This storm's crazy. It's soaking wet. I'll give you a ride back to camp." So he gets in, he drives up this road that goes quite a ways and then sort of wraps around this other part of this mountain and then starts to come back towards their camp. And I guess he dropped him off. I don't know why, because my uncle asked him to, like, drop me off right here. It was really close, though. They say this is within 300 yards of his own camp. He drops him off at a different camp, and there's some horse corrals there. So, like, it's kind of an area you can identify. They know where this was at. There's this other camp, and in the camp, there's like, I think there's one other guy and three girls in a tent. And so they're like, "Hey, what are you doing?" They dropped him off. He's sitting there soaking wet. They're like, "Hey, come in, get in this tent. You got to get warmed up for a minute. We got some coffee. Here's some coffees." They're trying to be nice. So he goes in, he drinks some coffee. These are like the last people to see him alive. He drinks some coffee and he's like, "Yeah, no, I know where you can't see because now it's like a whiteout. There's blizzard, there's snow everywhere, according to people." But he's like, "Yeah, no, my camp's just right over here." And if you look at where they camped on a map, it is. It's like 300 yards away. That's not a big area. I mean, granted, there's tons of, thick timber and whatever else. So certainly you could get lost, but like that's not a large area to disappear in, right? A 300-yard diameter. So he walks out of the tent after having coffee with these people. They're watching him. He essentially just walks into this blizzard and disappears. Never saw him again. Nobody. Those were the last people to see him alive, just disappears. 300 yards from his camp, right? Then in subsequent weeks, even days, right? They organized search and rescue. But then for weeks, I mean, they didn't just put in a little bit of effort. They had hundreds of people on foot, horseback, helicopters for weeks. There's multiple large search parties that went out, and then people just volunteering in between the big sort of search events, covering everything. And so in that, they found where he shot his deer from people walking around. They saw exactly where he shot it, where all the blood was at. You could see where he drug it and then left it, right? They recovered the deer. So you can see where he drug it to, left it. Then you talk to the guy, who gave him a ride. You talk to these other people. So easy to kind of figure out the general area. And again, just never found him. So in my mind, I mean, there's nobody else cruising around in the snow like that trying to abduct people, right? I mean, you could barely get around. I'm sure the guy in the truck went home. The other people hunkered down in their tent. I think he just got turned around in the crazy snow, and climbed under a log to get out of the weather or something, and honestly probably froze to death. And then there's mountain lion bears. His body probably got eaten. The crazy part, though, to me is like, even if that happened, which I think is the most likely scenario, he probably froze to death and nobody found him, probably out there a long time. Eventually, animals just kind of picked him apart. And if you've ever shot a deer, elk, and then gone back a year or two later to your kill site, it's spotless, right? I mean, they carry out the
This is
bones,
kind
they
of
pick them.
this is yeah. Okay, go ahead. I'm thinking what you're about to say.
Yeah, so like I've done that with my own elk, and like it's spotless, right? So it's not difficult to assume if you didn't find him that first year, like that things could be dispersed. It would be very hard to then find him after that. However, like no shred of clothing, like the blue
That's what I'm
jeans,
saying.
not
That's
anywhere,
exactly
no
what I'm
red,
thinking too.
yeah, no red hoodie anywhere, no skull or something, because those are typically things you might see laying around. And last year, here's what's kind of crazy. Just this last year, so it's over 60 years, they found a missing hunter's body. Like from that same year, basically 60 years later, we kind of heard about this and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, like, wow, maybe this is it." Totally different person and family, kind of in northern Idaho, but in Idaho, very similar thing. 60 years later, found his body. And so I'm kind of like, man, you never know. That could still happen because that happened with him, so maybe there's that chance still. But I think that's what probably occurred. It's probably just spread out now. And if you were to find something, somebody would just somehow have to happen upon some shred of something like that. The clothing by this, point in time is obviously totally gone, disintegrated, but you'd have to find some kind of bones or something
Man, yeah.
wild.
We've all seen those kind of movies and heard those kind of stories, right? And even even worked some of those kind of cases before, and you usually find like some sort of remains,
And
like
so again,
something.
imagine this 300-yard sort of radius area. Like how far in a snowstorm like that? He couldn't even hike out of the canyon, right? So he had to go get a ride. How far could he really go from that spot that he was dropped off at? Not very far in a storm like that, right? He would have had to be right there somewhere. That's what's weird. And here's the other crazy thing. So I've planned, I didn't, like I said, I didn't know all these details until later in life because my dad was sensitive about it. He just never talked about it, right? And like I said,
Yeah.
I was way into the outdoors and never knew, and it was just a weird thing. And then I kind of knew and understood and was like, okay, I get it. So I've always had this in the back of my mind too. I've never gone to the spot. I want to go there, especially being like an avid outdoorsman and all the experience I've had. And you never know, but I'm like, man, what if I was the person to go like find something? Because I'm an accomplished outdoorsman. And just to see it. I want to go up there and see it just because I haven't. So anyways, it's on the books. I've just never done it. I've got it all kind of mapped out, based on the news articles. I've mapped exactly where people described all these different points so that when I go, I can see all of it. I'll hike it, take my horses, all that stuff. But again, I think it would just have to be pure luck on stumbling onto something at this point because everything would be so dispersed and wherever it's at, carried off by animals or disintegrated clothing, all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of what happened with that other guy last year. Somebody was hunting, it's hunting season, and he went down into I think he actually found the body off of some just kind of small cliff, like a rock face. So this other guy had fallen off like a rock face, and it was just in such a weird spot. Nobody had ever seen it, and it just happened to be a hunter who's hiking around the area. It'd have to be something very similar to that, I think for anything to occur. So who knows? But I think that's probably what happened. Or maybe he's sipping Mai Tais down in Mexico. I don't know. What's
Bro,
funny is
what the
they interviewed people too, though. So it's a small community. I said they're from Burley and Rupert, and they are, but Paul is actually where my dad and his brother were from. So you've got Rupert. It's a small town anyway, but Paul is tiny. So I would take my skateboard as a kid and I could skateboard from one end of the town to the other in like 5 minutes, right? So it's this tiny little town. So all this small community, they of course had all sorts of like conspiracy theories, right? And people have talked about that. And there's the police records show, some of the interviews and asking those types of things and people saying, well, what if it was this? And so there were some weird ideas like that, but no one, I don't think anyone, none of them credible, right? None that anyone really believed because he was also just a 19-year-old country kid, right? It's not like he has all these resources to be disappearing and skipping off to Mexico, right? Ugh.
brother? You have to go hunt that area.
I know, I need to. What's interesting is it's not a story I would ever want to exploit. And to be honest, this is the only time I've ever like told this story kind of publicly, talked to people about it. However, I've got a buddy, him and I have talked to a couple different kind of big production companies about potential different TV shows, just because I do so much in the outdoors and I'd love to do something like that. And this kind of background has come up in discussing my background and people key in on that, right? And they're like, oh, well, we could explore this. And yeah, that'd be cool. I wouldn't want to exploit that, but yeah, certainly, that could be part of a greater story or something. But I've recently had some conversations like that. You never know. We'll see where those things go, but it's interesting. So think about that dynamic though, having that background and then, me, my dad's youngest child, youngest son, just driven to be in the outdoors. And then the stuff that I do. I mean, like I said, I'm out there by myself in the middle of the wilderness for days at a time with no one. I got the first inReach when it came out, and that was like a really big deal because anytime I'd go hunting, my dad would just get super weird, right? He'd want to know exactly where I'm at. And, as a kid or a younger person, you're just like, I'd get annoyed, right? Like, God, leave me alone. I know what I'm doing, right? Like, get off my back. And this was kind of before I realized too much about my uncle, even. And so again, now I'm fine with it, but he would always act kind of weird and it always bugged me because I'm like, man, like I got it. Leave me alone. Um, so there's that whole aspect. And then like I'll have to tell you about a bear hunt I did last year by myself. It was like just an insane hunt. That whole story is crazy. We'll have to tell you about it. But anyways, doing things like that and my dad knowing I do that and going by myself and potentially, getting lost and having something happen, obviously that weighs on his mind, right? I think I've done it for so long now. It's kind of like, yeah, but he always wants to know where I'm headed, obviously.
Yeah, without question, rightfully so. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but just with my mind, it seems like a really a unique story. I don't know if a TV show is the option, but maybe something that you could do personally with like one other guy to document it and
Yeah,
make your own like
exactly.
kind of short, short film, hour-long film of you honoring him and going
Yeah,
out and hunting
that
that
was kind of
area.
my idea. I wanted to do like a little
Yeah,
short film. I haven't done much on YouTube, but like I said, that this bear hunt we've been putting together, I was going to put that out. This was an idea I was thinking, some kind of just short
yeah,
film on that because I think it's super interesting and we could do it, in a good way. Show some of the articles,
yeah,
pictures, stuff like that.
absolutely. That's what I was thinking too. Yeah, really, very, very intriguing. It's extremely unfortunate, but there's always that sense of mystery that I think we're all kind
Yeah,
of drawn to.
so crazy. Yeah, absolutely. Because who knows? It could be anything. You like to, people like to think about just whatever potential crazy ideas there could be out there. And that's kind of fun to do. But, if you think about those type of situations and where he was at, who he was, it's just, yeah, I'm like 99% sure he just froze to death and got eaten by mountain lions and
Yeah,
bears, to be honest.
yeah, no, and I'm
Seems
sure that
like,
that's probably the case, right?
yeah.
Especially because he had multiple opportunities to kind of get snatched up,
Yeah.
especially by that guy driving.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's so crazy to think though, these people, he walked in their tent, drank some coffee, he's soaking wet. They're like, "Hey, do you want to stay here?" He's like, "No, no, no. My tent's just right over here. I'm a couple hundred yards away. I know where I'm at now. I just got dropped off. I should just be right over here." And they watched him walk out into the snow, right? You think of a movie, all this white out snow, and he walks away into the snow, and that's it. Last anybody saw of him. Isn't that crazy?
So, I mean, it's unbelievable. Yeah, it blows my mind when I was reading your article that you sent me. I was like, what the fuck? Like 60 years, nobody knows what happened to this guy? So
Yeah.
it was one of the things I had written down. I was like, I have to ask you about it. So I'm glad you brought it up. And I know you said you
Yeah.
haven't really talked about it. So thank you for sharing. I mean, it's extremely intriguing.
I think it's cool. I like to talk about it, but out of respect for my dad, for one, obviously it's sensitive to him, and I wouldn't ever want to
Yeah,
use that story to like further myself in any kind of way, right? But it is an interesting story to talk about.
it is. Yeah, I get that. Who
And,
does
and
go ahead, go ahead.
no, you're good. I was just gonna say it was interesting last year. Well, another interesting part of the, I guess, background is we're not that close with my dad's side of the family, to be honest. We were always more close to my mom's side. But that said, some of the family members on my dad's side this last year had reached out to the Cassia County, that's where Rupert's at, Cassia County Sheriff's Office, saying, "Hey, have you ever heard anything else over the years? Any news?" And there hasn't, of course, but they put out like a post on Facebook just saying, "Hey, this happened 60 years ago, right before hunting season. If you're going out in this area, can you keep your eyes open?" Because this is just right after they found that other hunter from 60 years ago as well. So they're like, "Hey, it does happen. If you're hunting in this area, please keep your eyes out, eyes and ears open for anything you might see." So yeah, interesting. I think and just, to give people an idea, if you are familiar with the area, if you're a listener. So Southern Idaho, like I said, you got Rupert and Burley. Just south of that, there's Monument Peak is what it's called. They were camped kind of right by Monument Peak in that general area. I think it's Trout Creek is the creek that they were kind of hunting. So that whole area, if somebody is, maybe they're already familiar with the story, I don't know. But yeah, it's kind of the area.
Interesting. Let's switch gears here. Who does all your photography? Do you mess around with the camera a lot? Because your pictures on your page are just they're
Yeah.
amazing. That's pretty much what drew me when I think you commented on one of my things and I went to your page. I was like, wow, like this is awesome work. Who does your content?
So both, like I do quite a bit of it myself, which I hate, right? Like who wants to go out and take pictures of themselves or like
Same,
film themselves?
same.
Yeah. But so I'll give you the background on how it kind of started my little Instagram page because it's not huge. I've got a decent little following. I think I've got a little over 16,000 now. And, the past year or two, I put more effort into it to try to kind of grow it. But the way it started was just, I'm doing all this stuff for fun that I think is super cool and some wild trips. And I'm like, it'd just be fun to record some of this. So I started picking up a camera, you start to upgrade and get better stuff. And I've got some pretty decent camera gear, but just sort of started recording things, and whether it was with my phone or just a GoPro or whatever, and kind of progressed from there. And that's how I, got some attention of a couple different brands, right? Like you've got Origin on. I've done some stuff from them. I've got some stuff they're sending me here in the next week. They want me to get some content of, and it's really, what's cool is it's all the brands I've done things with. It's all very informal. I don't have any kind of formal relationship. It's just more like a friend of the program type thing, right? Which I really like because it's not my day job. I make zero money from social media at all. I spend money, right? Because I'm hunting and doing whatever, and then extra work to record it and do whatever. But so I started doing some of that just because I've always liked photography, as well as I mentioned early on, I'm kind of a movie buff, right? So I've always liked cinema and wanted to record really high quality stuff of these adventures that I'm going on. Again, it's all back to adventure. Like I watched all these things growing up and I'm like, man, I want to go on adventures. So then I go on adventures. Now I want to record the adventures, right? Because I think they're super cool and I think others will too. So I started kind of doing that. And then I would just tag brands that I'm spending money on your gear anyway, liking it and using it. So I would just tag them and they would repost or share it. And then a few of them were like, hey, we really like that. Here's this stuff. You want to go, you're doing this content anyway. It'll probably make it into your content. So here's some stuff just to use while you're out there because you're buying it anyway, that sort of thing. And then that's grown a little bit, with a few people, which is kind of cool, but it's still just a thing for fun on the side, right? Because I'm out there doing these things anyway. The social media part of it is just, it might as well pick up a camera and take it along. So to answer your question, long story short, I do some of it myself. And I think when I put in like the effort and try to make it really good, I'm pretty good at it. The problem is you can't do a lot of effort on photography and filming if you're really doing the activity, right? So I don't have a ton of hunting stuff on there because when I'm hunting, I'm super serious about it. And even though I'll bring cameras and say I'm going to use them, I don't. I leave them in the freaking camp every single time. I'm like, to hell with that shit. I don't have time. I can't mess with it. So I'll take them, and I just don't have a ton. Like this bear hunt that I mentioned that I want to put out. Well, I have that because a buddy came and he's really good and he filmed it. But every time I do it myself, I don't know, have the time. So to that end, I think I'm pretty good if I do put in the effort, but I'm more focused on the activity most of the time. So I'll do some myself, but I also have a few buddies that are really good, that'll come with me sometimes and film stuff. So I've got both. Some of the content I put out, like I posted a thing this morning, it's just a black and white picture. That was just straight up a picture I took myself, put the camera on a tripod. It's my buddy's, jacket. So my buddy Lane has Master Supply. It's this leather jacket company out of Canada that I'm friends with. And I've done a bunch of stuff with them, right? Because they're awesome. I like their brand and I like him a lot. And so I've got a leather jacket on. It's just a picture amongst a million others that I've taken and given to them. It's not even one that they use for their brand. It's just one I liked. So, but it's a picture I put out there. I think it's pretty cool. So stuff like that, like it's feasible to do yourself, but then, some of the filming is obviously harder to do because there's solo hunt guys out there. There's the solo hunter literally, and they do a pretty good job, right? And I recognize how difficult that is. But I hate, even today, my biggest gripe with like outdoor material, and this is why I really want to make stuff. My biggest gripe is so much of it is so shitty when it comes to like the filmmaking itself. I hate with a passion the whispering in the microphone with a bunch of wind. You spent all this time and money on like nice camera gear and you can't buy a decent microphone. Like drives me nuts, like that kind of stuff. And there's other people that do a really good job. Like I think the best one out there when it comes to hunting and filmmaking is Donnie Vincent. Love his stuff. I would like to
Without
just do
question.
more of what he's doing. Love his style and the way he does things. I think he's
Yeah.
awesome.
I have some buddies that are pretty close with Donnie. They've done some podcasts and some hunts with him, and
That's cool.
yeah, I like following his stuff as well. I'm in the same boat as you though, man. I'm pretty blessed. A lot of my friends are extremely talented with the camera.
Cool.
So whenever we go out, it's awesome because they always get like a bunch of cool content and I can just hunt, and they're,
Yeah.
they're filming or they're taking pictures. I'm like, this is amazing. And it's hilarious because whenever, if I'm solo or whenever I bring my camera, bro, I'm not gonna see nothing. And I'm damn sure not gonna kill. But if I leave that camera in the truck or just
Yeah.
at the house, I'm killing all the time. It's funny
Exactly.
how it works, man.
Yeah, the times I'm like, I'm gonna put in the effort and I'm gonna take this camera gear and I'm gonna try to hunt hard, but also do this. nothing happens. I'm like, I just hauled this shit around. It's heavy. It's, taking up space, and maybe I'll take a couple pictures, but I'm like, definitely wasn't worth it. And then I'll get mad and leave it, and then I'll go kill something. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, I get it. Yeah, and then you also have to be selective. Like one of my buddies is in my opinion one of the best photographers going. But when he comes with me, I never am like, hey, make sure you get a bunch of pictures of me or anything like that because he does it for a
Right.
living. I
Yeah.
want us to just be able to go out and enjoy each other's company and hunt as friends. We killed two bulls last year together,
Sweet.
and shit, I think that he just left. I mean, he didn't break his camera out until we actually killed the bulls, and it was
That's
great. And I took a bunch of pictures of him off of his camera. So when people
that's the
do it for a living, I'm
struggle.
always trying to be super selective about
Yeah,
that, if that makes sense. Yeah.
absolutely. For me, the biggest struggle with filming or taking pictures of things and social media generally, like, is the authenticity of it, right? Because
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, sometimes I'll take some pictures of myself, and sometimes because if a brand wants me to, because they're going to use that as like advertising, that's fine because that's what they're looking for. So I'll do that. I generally don't just like doing it to do it because it's not very authentic, right? Like I want to go out and be doing things, and we're filming it because I'm actually doing those things, right? Not because I'm pretending to. I didn't drive 4 hours into the mountains. Like I posted a thing for a brand the other day, Madison Creek, that I really like. It's just very high end kind of outdoor adventure type stuff, but it's like really nice clothing, jackets, whatever, not necessarily hunting. But I started doing some stuff with them recently, and I was up in Wyoming scouting for this elk hunt that I have coming up, right? So I was there anyway. I was legitimately there scouting, looking at this mountainside. I even threw up a camera and recorded it. Really pretty cool clip. And I did it in a way they could use it in whatever kind of like advertisement they want. But it's not like I drove 4 hours there to just go set this thing up and pretend I was in the mountains. I was legitimately there scouting for elk. So I say that because I've had brands reach out wanting me to do some things. And again, since it's for fun for me, I've said no to a bunch of it because I'm like, I really only want to work with brands that I genuinely like their stuff and I would buy it or I'm using it already.
Yeah.
Like the Made in America stuff for Origin, like, is a big deal to me. That resonates with me. I love their brand because of that. And I get content while I'm doing stuff. So a lot of times I'll go through periods too where I don't post anything at all on Instagram or anywhere. And then all of a sudden I'll just post a bunch because it's like I went out on some kind of escapade and we got like a ton of content. So then I'll post it for a while, right? But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line with it, and I can. Oh man, I'll get into it. Fuck it. Some of the stuff that I see, like it bothers me extremely. Like I get it, man. There's these guys that are working with these brands and they're trying to get content for them, and that's cool, man. Like, but
Yeah.
I want it to be. I just want it to be like transparent. Like,
Yeah.
get your content when you're actually out doing what it is that you're saying that it is that you're doing. Like if you're
Yeah.
hunting, like go hunting, actually hunt. I saw a guy the other day and I don't even know who he is, but I just was laughing. It was like a whole fucking photo shoot. He's kitted up in this company's gear and he's got his bow with him. And I'm like, I'm looking at the picture. I'm like, what is off here? He didn't even have a quiver on his bow. Like he had no arrows. He
Jeez.
just had his bow in his hand.
Yeah,
And I'm
just his
like,
bow for the picture. Yeah, it's just a prop.
it's like, man, come on. Like you ain't out here doing this.
And it's
And why is
tough.
your shit
I
so
said it.
why is your shit so clean?
Yeah.
Like I never understood that either. Like my gear is fucking trash all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And
The only
I don't
time
know. I
I'll
don't for whatever
do
reason it kind of bothers me. I just try to laugh it off. But
No, you're spot on. The only time I'll do stuff like that, and I have, like, you'll see it on my page or otherwise, is when they are like, hey, we want you to shoot this, this picture because we're going to use it like as it's an advertisement. It's like, okay, fine. I can do that for you. But most of the time, like, again, I'm just recording content because I'm doing it anyway. So it's for fun. And if I can
yeah.
capture some cool stuff, great. The only time I'll do something staged like that is if it's like they asked me to. But you can tell, to your point, when I do that, I'm not trying to play it off like it's something else. It is what it is.
Call it what it is, man. If it's a photo shoot, say that this is a photo shoot,
Yeah.
but don't throw
Right.
your binos up with with the tag still on your brand new hoodie from this company. And like, what are you glass in the mailbox, man? What the fuck?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Anyways, man, I want to be respectful of your time, but you did mention a bear hunt. Let's jump into that. What's so crazy about
Yeah.
this bear hunt? I want to hear about it.
Man, it's crazy. So this year, so we did a bear hunt this year. Didn't end up getting one. We saw a few. Took a buddy with me. Took my friend who's a camera guy who's phenomenal too. So we've got some really cool stuff from that. And some of the recent photos that I've posted that are like origin content were from that, right? A lot of camel stuff is from this because I had my buddy with me that could take stuff. But those are legit. Like I was actually hunting bears. He was just there filming. There's some crazy cool looking shots where I'm walking across like these really high cliff faces, or I am sitting there with my binos. But those are legit. I was watching bears. It wasn't like staged
Yeah,
at all.
you're
Yeah,
actually hunting. It's crazy.
yeah. But they were super cool. Like there's some of the coolest photos I think out there. Whether it's me or not, I'm like, those are badass, but they're legit. Like I was staring at bears or mountain goats. One of them, like I'm on a really high spot and there's a mountain goat like right across from us. And he was getting pictures of me, but then he turned and we even filmed it, right? So we see this mountain goat like sitting there. But anyways, this same hunt I did last year. I've done it 3 years in a row. So the first year, and I don't want to give too much away because here's how I hunt. I've done one or two kind of like earlier in my hunting career, paid guided hunts because I just wanted to get it done. And it was a cool opportunity. And honestly, every time I've done it, I knew the guy who was he's a guide, but he's like my buddy. So it was highly, highly discounted. But I got to hunt a cool, piece of private or whatever. However,
Oh
the
yeah.
majority of everything I've ever done is just straight up over the counter, the shittiest areas, 1,000 people, very, very low success. Because we just talked about my background, like growing up, just having to figure it out myself. I hunted elk for seven, tangent, 7 years before I killed one by myself. And eventually I killed one. Then I've like been pretty consistent every year after that. But I day in and day out every single year for 7 years with no success. Like that's brutal, man. So back to the bear hunt. My point is I put in all this research and effort in Idaho. I'll say that over the counter bear hunt, tons of research to figure out where I want to go. I even was able to get a hold of some locals, kind of pick their brain, figure stuff out, try to figure out the best time to go, try to figure out when the snow is going to melt and I could even access the area, all that stuff. So the first year, me and my buddy go, we both see bears and have opportunities. And he ends up killing one and I don't. And I didn't because another part of this whole story with me is I always like to make stuff harder too. I'm kind of an idiot. I took I've when it comes to rifles, I don't like modern rifles. I've got a ton of lever actions. I've got several of the single shot Sharps falling block rifles. That's the like original Buffalo gun. Have you ever seen Quigley Down Under? One of my favorite cowboy
No.
movies ever. You ever seen Quigley Down Under? Okay, go watch it with Tom Selleck, one of the best ever. He has this rifle in it. It's like half the story of the movie, this single shot rifle that he shoots in Quigley. I have the exact same gun. Separate story we should talk about, but I killed a buffalo. And we can run over if you want, but we probably don't want to make a 4 hour podcast. But anyways, I have these rifles. So I decided on the bear hunt, I would take one of those. Spot and stock. So I'll tell you all about how we got in there because that's crazy too. Spot and stock bear hunt. This isn't bait. Riding horses into the backcountry, trying to just look for bears. And I took a single shot Sharps 4570 rifle with a peep sight, right? So generally, you're pretty far away from spot and stock bears, right? And so I'd have to close the distance. If you're shooting it late at night with waning light, it's very difficult to see through a peep sight and see something on the other side, right? So all these things, long story short, I had a chance at a really good blonde bear, pretty big one, and I just couldn't quite get into position. I kept trying to move because he was moving up this avalanche chute. Couldn't get a shot. And then it got too dark to really see. But as I'm doing that, I hear my buddy shoot. So he gets one the first year. Second year, I plan it out. I think he's going to go. He can't. Then another buddy's going to go. He can't. I'm still planning on it. I got my tag. And here's where like this is so crazy because I was successful. I've only killed one bear because I've only been doing it for 3 years, bear hunting. And I've killed one bear 1 out of 3 years. And the second year, he kind of bails, can't go. And I'm looking at the forecast of the weekend. It's kind of the only weekend I have to go. And it shows it's probably going to rain, but then it stops and it rains. And you're in the high country. And I'm like, so it's probably going to rain the whole time. Is it worth going? And if it's heavy rain, the bears aren't just going to be standing out there all day. They'll probably hunker down and then come out when the sun comes out. And you've got the short window. And can I even get into position where I know the bears are at? So all this goes through your head. So I'm like, I'm not going to go. And then I decide I'm going to stay home. My wife takes the kids and does some other stuff. And this always happens to me. So I'm sitting around, I'm like, oh, I can't sit here. So I grab all my shit, I throw it in the truck. Who knows if I even have everything. And this time I take my 300 Win Mag with a scope because I'm like, I just want to get it done. I'm like, I screwed up last year. I'm taking a good rifle, good scope, throw it all in my truck. It takes 8 hours to get to where I want to go because it's such a crazy, man, I don't even want to say too much to give it away because I saw somebody post something on Instagram, nothing to do with hunting, that just is blowing up this spot. It's like it's the most remote spot in the entire state. It really is. It's so crazy. I didn't even know it existed before. But to get there, because it's so hard, like you can take the freeway most of the way, but then once you get off the freeway, it's another 4 hours from where I'm at to Boise. It's 5 hours, right? From there. And then if you're going to keep going up the state highway, either direction, right? You go from there. But I'm just saying, if you're coming from Utah through Idaho, so then tack on another 4 hours to get to wherever I want to go. And man, so after an 8 hour drive, I get there and it's right before dark and it starts, well, how much? Let's see, did I do it in the morning? No. Okay. So I get there that evening and I thought I had time, but you can see it's starting to rain. So like I sit in the truck, I have my horses with me. I have two of them, and we just sit in the truck and they sit in the trailer and it's like starts pouring really heavy rain. So after 8 hour drive, I'm to this like kind of trailhead spot and I just sit in the truck while it's pouring rain. And then after a while it stops, but it's also kind of getting dark. And I just drove 8 hours, right? I'm exhausted. And I'm like, do I sleep at the truck and then wake up and try to drive in or not drive in, ride in the following morning? But then I'm like, then I'll miss any kind of morning hunt and then I waste all this time. So I'm like, screw it. I'm going to go in tonight because I know where it's at. I've done this once before, but this is like an extremely remote, 100% wilderness, right? You're supposed to sign into the wilderness when you go in. So I get my horses, get all my stuff, get all packed up. The rain just stopped. I'm like, I got to make it before it starts raining. So I start riding in. Gets dark super quick because it was already late, like I said. So now I'm riding in the dark with headlamps. It's pitch black. And in this area, I mean, it's pretty crazy in one part because you're in the Sawtooth. So these huge jagged mountains. I'm riding next to this river. There's these, I mean, it's just a really skinny kind of trail with a sheer cliff drop off into the river. And I'm doing this all at night, riding past this with a headlamp and a horse. It's wet because it had just rained. So I ride past that, and then I get to this avalanche chute that you ride across. Should be no big deal. There's no way I could have anticipated this, but it was just after, so what, 2 years ago, we had this gigantic winter. Everybody did, but Utah and Idaho had like the two biggest winters in their history. So this avalanche chute, it's heavily timbered. Well, the snow had come down and it had pushed every single tree over. So it's all laid down and the trail goes straight up to like a 15, 20 foot high wall of trees that had just been pushed down from the avalanche chute. So I ride up to it and I'm like, what do I do now? I just drove 8 hours. I just rode like 2 hours in the dark with a headlamp, and the entire thing is covered with trees. And so to my left is the river, and it's like a drop off. I can't go down right there. To the right, it goes up the avalanche chute, but it's this mountain of down timber. Like it's like 15, 20 feet high because it all got pushed down from this avalanche, right? So you look to the right, and then it just gets into all this rocky, shaly cliff stuff. So if you were walking, no big deal. You just climb over this stuff, right? You can't do that with horses. So I'm like, shit, man, what am I going to do? And it just gets crazy. I'm so determined. I'm like, I'm not turning around. Like that's not an option. So I just turned to the right to go uphill into this avalanche chute and slowly, long story short, picked my way like over these logs and into the rocks and over the top and crossed the avalanche chute. Thought it was going to break all my horse's legs, and honestly, they almost did it a couple points because they slide into these crevices, right? I mean, it was gnarly. It was really bad. Any normal person should have just like turned around, right? But I get over that, cross to the other side, and then I just keep going on in the dark. So then I finally get there, set up camp, wake up the next day. It's pouring rain. And I actually did record this. It's not a great recording, but if anybody wants to like see what I'm talking about, I did put it on my YouTube. There's like a half decent, like mostly GoPro recording of some of this stuff. But anyways, I go make camp. I get up in the morning and then hunt hard all day. Don't see anything that evening. Get into a bear, shoot it, skin it out. I'm stoked. First bear I've ever killed, right? Take it down, pack it onto the horses. It's a several hour ride back to where I camped, right? And I'm very far in the wilderness by myself now, right? So I loaded up on my horses. I'm all covered in blood, as you can imagine from skinning out a bear. I've got it all packed on. And now I'm riding in the dark several hours just to where my camp is actually at, in the dark with a headlamp. And it's all crazy, high, rocky stuff, cliff faces. So it's already super sketchy. But I do that. And we talked about being alone and scared. Even with horses, I see eye shine all over. And I'm in bear country and I'm covered in blood. I'm riding back to camp. And so like I ride all the way back to camp. I get there. It's this long ride, kind of this crazy adventure. And again, I'm by myself this whole time. I get there and in my mind, I'm like, you know, oh, because it's the weekend and same thing we talked about. I'm feeling guilty and I want to get back. I'm like, I could pack up camp tonight because the horses are packed with meat already. I could hurry and break down my tent and I could get back to my truck, a couple hours. No big deal with my headlamp. I can do it and it'll be no big deal. I forgot about the stupid avalanche chute, and there's no way I'm going to get back over that the other way, especially with bear packed and all of camp. But I forgot. So I loaded up. I'm an idiot. I start riding that way. It starts pouring rain again. It's the middle of the night. It's dark. So now it's soaking wet. I'm riding in a headlamp. Again, middle of the wilderness, like hours and hours and hours from anybody. And I hit the avalanche chute and I realized, right? I'm like, son of a bitch. Like, I forgot about this. So then I have to, now I'm facing the opposite direction. So uphill is left and the river is to the right. So I have to hang a right and drop down into the river because there's just no way I could have gone back over that. I would have broken legs, who knows. So I drop into the river. Now I'm riding in the dark, in the rain, covered in blood, in a river that's like glacier water, freezing, not too deep, thankfully. So it was manageable. But I have to ride down that and I get past this avalanche chute, but then it's still like this kind of sheer cliff, right? I'm looking up with my headlamp. I can't get back up to where the trail is. So I just get stuck in the river for, I don't even know, a really long time. And I just have to keep riding down. Eventually, I get out back up into the timber and just have to like bushwhack my way back to where I thought the trail was. Took several hours to eventually find it, get back on the trail, ride out to my truck, unload all the shit. We're soaking wet. It's still raining. Tie up the horses, get all my stuff away, load the horses up, let them sit in there for a little bit, hoping the rain would kind of quit. And it did eventually. I mean, it's like, I don't know, 3 in the morning at this point, right? Get all my shit unloaded finally. And then once it starts raining, pull them back out, tie them up for a minute. But then they've been working all day and night and haven't eaten anything. So then I stand out there for another hour while they eat grass and do whatever. Then I walk them down to the river so they can get some water. Then I bring them back up. Then I tie them up. It's, close to sunup at this point. Then I just go lay in the back of my truck for like a couple hours, took a snooze, woke up after all that couple hours, drove 8 hours back home, showed up, had this bear, took it to the taxidermist, and that was my weekend. So that's the kind of stuff when I say like I go on crazy adventures by myself, that's what I mean, right? And if you want to I mean, I could have stayed home, but I wanted to get it done. I wanted a bear, so I did it, and that's what I went and did. Insane though.
That's
Insane.
the
That's
thing, man. That
crazy.
that's the thing. People aren't willing to go to those lengths.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah, you listened to the one with Kate and I last week. People aren't willing to do some of that shit, man. But
No,
a
yeah,
lot of times that's what separates guys that are successful out there to the guys that aren't.
yeah, absolutely.
Good
Crazy.
on
Well,
you.
it's been fun, man. I appreciate you having me on. Like I said, you had some pretty big guests. I think I'm kind of a nobody compared to them. So thanks for having me.
No, everybody's somebody, man. That's what it is. I mean, I'll be talking to guys online and they'll be like, "Oh, you're Tyler from the podcast, man. This is so cool." And I'm like, "I'm just like you, brother.
That's
I'm just
awesome.
like you.
Seems
Like
like you're
this
picking
is
up quite a bit of steam, which is sweet. Love it.
it's been fun, man. It's
How many
been
episodes do you know?
this will be 153, I think.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, every week on the week, man. So it's been a lot of fun. And I try to tell people, man, if I can freaking do this shit, if I can create my own business and do a podcast, I'll like anybody can do it. It takes a lot of work, but
And are
anybody
you,
can
for
do
your
it. I'm
training like programs, are you building like custom programs for guys? Is that what you do? Or you have some standard ones you put out?
no, everything's custom.
That's
Yep.
awesome.
Yeah, it's really fun, man. It's really fun. And I was talking to a guy last night actually who was kind of looking to get in this realm of things. And I'm like, bro, stick with it. If I can do this shit, anybody can do it. I promise you. Just do your
Yeah.
homework and, late nights, early mornings. And what's really helped me and kind of getting sidetracked, and I'll let you go, but I'm just not taking no for an answer, dude.
Yeah.
Like literally, I'm just
How it
fucking
goes.
pushing.
Anything in life, right? You just have to be
Yes.
persistent. Don't take no for an answer. Just get after it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm building up so much momentum. It's like I'm just this is my baby, dude. Like it literally is. This is what I do all day, every day. Try to get awesome people on like you. This was a sweet conversation, very fun. I had no idea how it was gonna go. These are my favorite types of
Yeah.
episodes, and it was great, man. You got a great story, and you're super easy. Really wasn't an interview; it was just a fun conversation. But have you done podcasts before?
I actually haven't. No, I mean, I talk to people
Fuck
off the road,
yeah,
but I haven't actually recorded a podcast. No, first one.
hell yeah! I love popping cherries on this thing. Let's
Yeah, that's
go.
what I was going to say.
Yes, sir. No, you did great, man.
Love it.
It was really cool. But yeah, you never know what you're gonna get on here, and it's just day after day, man. Just consistency, and that's kind of how I've built my stuff is just by being consistent, and especially
Yeah.
lately, not taking no and just charging. So it's been a lot of
That's,
fun. Thanks for seeing that too. Appreciate it.
yeah. Congrats on the success. Keep grinding. I love it. Keep hammering, as Cameron would say, huh?
That's what they say, brother. Hey, where can people find you? And I'll let you slide.
Yeah, so the only thing I do is Instagram at Bustin Bronx. That's my Instagram handle. YouTube I have as well, exact same thing, Bustin Bronx. I haven't done much there. That bear hunt I just mentioned is there. Not a great one, just because it was sort of me solo filming with that GoPro. But this year we went to the same location, had my buddy. It's not out yet, but we're gonna put out like a 15-minute, super high quality video. Still kind of working on it. Just highly cinematic, right? I mean, because it's a beautiful spot. So, if you want to check that out, go check out YouTube and hopefully that'll be out in a couple weeks.
Awesome, man. Stay on the line really quick, and I'll get you out of here. Thank you, Anthony.
Cool. Yeah.